love community, right? It's a word that is used a lot in the context of crypto and lots of other stuff. I've been using community a lot myself. My lab, the Media Enterprise Design Lab at the University of Colorado Boulder, has recently published 2 pamphlets that both talk about community in their title. Exit to Community, a strategy for startups trying to be owned by the people who create value, and Community Rules, a kind of governance manual. So this word, is one for which I'm guilty as charged. Again, we see this word a lot in crypto context. Here's a kind of landing page dashboard for one of a DAO that says the community wants to hear from you. But looking at this page, at least, just this, you wonder, is this what a community looks like when you think of how that word has been used before? Tech, crypto, adaptation of it. Does a community look like a bunch of numbers and votes? Are these really communities? Is that a market token and price system really what people have meant by community in the past? And is something lost when we build our communities on the basis of tokens? So this really long word, so long it doesn't fit in the screen, crypto economics is kind of at the root of what we mean by community in the context of crypto. It's a word widely associated with the Vitalik Buterin that focuses on pairing cryptographic math and computer systems with economic incentives for good behavior and economic penalties for bad behavior. And the theory goes that if you use these incentives right, you can build really powerful communities where people can do remarkable things and share the value from what they create when the incentives are aligned. And indeed, this logic of cryptoeconomics has presented some really exciting innovations and experiments in governance and community making. This is what attracts me to this space. When I first heard about Bitcoin alone in the middle of Occupy Wall Street while I was covering that as a reporter, I wasn't that interested. It was when, in January 2014, I learned about the Ethereum white paper and this possibility of building all kinds of dynamic, creative governance spaces that drew me in and have really kept me in this conversation. There's a lot of things that I know from my work with cooperative businesses really are new to in the crypto space. That crypto economics has created possibilities for rethinking governance in really radical ways that I think the rest of the world has a lot to learn from. At the same time, I think there are some real limits that we might want to consider when we enter a world based on holdings, on tokens, on coins, rather than on persons. And this is linked to, on the one hand, the privacy-focused nature of a lot of the crypto projects, the difficulty of ascertaining someone's identity without violating that privacy-centric logic. But at a fundamental level, these are systems that see money, not just in the incentives, but actually in the subjects and the participants. They are represented as tokens. And so what is lost when we lose our ability to see a kind of person-first society and indeed community? First is the challenge of plutocracy, a persistent challenge in cryptoeconomic spaces. Something that comes up again and again and again, where those who have more holdings have more power, whether or not their power is aligned with the good of the broader community, right? And of course, the advantage of this is that there's skin in the game. Those who have the most to lose have the most to say. But on the other hand, sometimes that means they can exploit others for their own benefit. And when you look at the writings of Vitalik Buterin, who we mentioned earlier, this is a persistent concern for him and other protocol designers that plutocracy is a real challenge that is kind of baked into the logic of the systems that they've been creating. Now, this piece gets a little more abstract, a little harder to pin down. But this is the question of who we are as persons when we're participating in a community that is so focused on token value that looks like this, right? What does it ultimately do to us? How do we see ourselves? How do we see our own agency? When the system sees us as people who are always trying to maximize the value of our tokens or something, how does it affect the sense of our own selves and what we can do to participate, what we want out of that community? And of course, communities throughout time have had economic components, but more often than not, they've been voluntary associations that actually try to exclude economic incentives from how they develop and encourage people to participate. So it seems to me that there is something lost. There's a danger, there's a limitation when we rely so much on economic incentives to urge behavior. And then, of course, there's the concern of externalities. Consider cases like the environmental effects of Bitcoin mining. This is an effect that is not visible to the system. The Bitcoin system itself, other than when Elon Musk cartoonishly buys Bitcoin and says he's going to get rid of it because of the carbon footprint, and Twitter goes crazy on all sides. Normally, the system does not see those kinds of impacts, and this is a persistent issue with systems that rely on that rely solely on economic logics. If a concern is not captured in the economy that you've designed, your system might not be able to cope with that concern, especially if the economic logics are the driving motivation for people, and people are trained to think of themselves as homo economicus or homo crypto economicus. So what if we considered a different approach? Now, this is something that is a bit of a dispute, a kind of ongoing conversation in crypto land. Like, are DAOs, are crypto protocols and networks closer to businesses or closer to governments? Are they mainly economic activities? Are they really political activities? I think the reality is ultimately they have to be both. And I draw here from a long-standing literature of concern in political science and a number of disciplines about the impacts of an increasingly powerful economic sector in comparison to our political life. And if everything is driven by an economic logic, it becomes hard to see certain values. Here Wendy Brown talks about liberty, equality, fairness, or they also talk about solidarity. There are all sorts of terms that kind of don't make sense if you are operating solely in an economic and indeed crypto-economic logic. There's no sense of citizenship. In some ways that might be liberating, but in some ways not. And I argue that we need to recognize that crypto-economics alone is too constraining, that it has limitations on our range of governance, that we cannot simply rely on economic incentives to produce systems that are truly accountable to the humans who participate in them. That too often we'll be bringing only a part of ourselves that is concerned with economic returns, that will only be able to serve parts of our societies that are capturable in tokens, not the stuff, the ecologies, the other systems that are beyond the sphere of what tokens happen to capture. And I'm going to offer a few strategies for how people are actually already developing crypto-political systems in the context of crypto-economic systems. So one strategy is to draw on the long legacy, which, for instance, my last book was about, and been a great deal of interest to me, of cooperative business models and cooperative structures. And so we're seeing experimentation at the legal layer, for instance, where here in Colorado we have very flexible co-op laws. So we see projects like Opolis and ETH Denver, a major Ethereum conference, using a cooperative as a legal structure for a token economy. So a democratic cooperative, one person, one vote, is the legal layer, while the economic layer runs through tokens. And this is pretty cool in some respects because a lot of what people are trying to do with tokens and crypto economics actually was done through the cooperative movement for generations, like distributing value according to participation, having fair stakeholder involvement, and so it's kind of an interesting marriage. There's also the possibility of bringing cooperative-like structures into the protocol layers themselves. And here you see, for instance, in a recent writing from Vitalik Buterin, calls for non-token based governance, focusing on membership, personhood, or on reputation and participation. Both of those are really kind of aligned with the cooperative legacy and present less economic ways of structuring power in our networks. Another approach for kind of a less economic logic here is mission orientation. I mentioned One Hive earlier, and one thing that One Hive has done, in addition to having this token network, is actually having a community covenant at the core of it, and then has a dispute resolution protocol aligned with the community covenant. So even though there's this economy floating around in the system, ultimately nothing can violate that very values-based community covenant. And so in this way, they've managed to kind of wrap the economy inside a logic of values and mission. There are a number of projects figuring out ways to do this kind of independently. One interesting case wasn't successful, but I think bears some interesting lessons, is Civil, which was a journalism network that attempted to create an economic logic that would not simply serve to maximize the value of the token, but actually to uphold journalistic values. So kind of intangible values being upheld by a crypto-economic system. Now, my call here is not for us to replace crypto-economics with crypto-politics, as I've kind of outlined. The goal is actually to recognize that we need ecosystems that involve both. And we need to be intentional about ways to ensure that there are political strategies and pathways that can counteract some of the limitations that crypto-economics has. And in some respects, this is really a conservative, old-fashioned call to the old idea of liberal democracy, that the economy should exist in tandem with democratic institutions. And even though this might sound like a call for more complexity and more kind of governance stuff, I think this kind of approach could actually enable more governance minimization in some cases, where you're essentially offloading that governance to maybe a cross-chain system or some system that is connected to a particular project that does the more democratic, the crypto politics for it, but the project is free to have a very simple and streamlined process. So if we are able to create ecosystems where you have certain crypto-political nodes, in some ways it could free up different kinds of projects within that ecosystem to have much simpler governance on their own, and trust those other projects to handle some of the more complex questions. I'll leave it there. Again, this is part of a paper that's a work in progress. Please take a look at a draft if you like. The address is there. Again, I'm sorry I can't be there. Please be in touch if you're able. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear any feedback, and have a great time.
Yeah, thank you. Yes. So, next thing is choosing what you want to eat tomorrow. Tomorrow very street.
Yeah.
Not tomorrow, but on Thursday when we go to the restaurant.
No, tomorrow.
It's gonna be a fishbowl discussion?
Yes, it's a fishbowl discussion. What else? It's raining tomorrow.
Ah, okay. Then we can decide it.
Thursday is better.
Then there is no urgency.
The menu is doing later. That's why I was surprised.
Ah, okay.
Okay, we don't do the menu now.
No, because I thought it was tomorrow.
It will be called now.
Yeah.
Okay, never mind the menu. We have a different program.
Can I copy paste the link from Nathan and send it to the group chat? Because the link was in his presentation, but it's not clickable.
You said it? You said it? What? That we are not doing it now? Yes, kind of. Okay, Damiano is ready. Hello, Damiano. Can you hear us? Wait. Okay. Can you hear us? No, wait. Fuck. A second. He's not hearing us. Sorry. Can you hear us now? Can you hear us now, Damiano? No.
No, you can write to him.
No audio.
No, it's not here. Here it is. Is it this? No.
Is the microphone? I don't know.
I don't know.
You want to wait?
Okay, so past presentation, Damiano is the co-founder of Airbnb, the cooperative alternative to Airbnb. And the last 2 years I've moved to another project that is starting in the next year in January. It's called Cop Valley. It is now presenting. So I'm leaving him speak and have a good presentation. Good. Thank you.
Okay, you should be able to hear me. Just 1 second. Okay. So, just what's up? Okay. Nice to meet everyone. It is quite sensitive. I don't see anyone of you, but thank you to having me here. And I will present today just what we are working on in Italy, in Emilia-Romagna, presenting a little bit our experiences, previous experience with what does it takes to create a platform cooperative and which are probably the major challenge that we need to face to overcome some of the bottlenecks that actually are blocking the rise of these alternatives to extractive platforms. I will share the screen to present, just 1 second. Okay. You should see my screen. Can you see it? Yes. No, please, Julia, write me. Okay, just 1 second. So, my name is Daniel. I work for one cooperative that is called Hypernova. That is a cooperative of digital workers that joined together to have the protection of contractualized work instead of being just freelance. And I work also for Borderless, that is the company behind the platform design toolkit. What I'm going to present to you today is the project that is called Cop Valley. That is the idea of an ecosystem that would somehow act as an aggregator for initiatives that try to create a platform economy that is based on cooperation and collaboration principles. So, I guess you probably have already some speakers that have been explaining you what's the idea behind platform cooperativism, but just to give you an idea, the movement of platform cooperativism was born in around 2016 thanks to a book edited by Trevor Scholz. The basic idea was that to fight and create a fairer model to extractive platforms that take our data, the value that we produce online, a model that could have behind instead a for-profit company but a cooperative with the users that are part of the governance and own the mean which the infrastructure, the digital infrastructure, the platform itself. This could somehow create a fairer model. And this simple idea, the idea of creating an alternative platform based on the cooperative model was extremely successful. There is still a very high media coverage, and okay, you don't see the presentation anymore. Mi sentite? Buio. You cannot see? Provo a condividere la schermo intero. Ora? Si vede? Prima si è vista? Provo a uscire e entrare. Ciao, ora vedo. Sorry for this. Sì. Can you see it right now? I'm sharing the screen. Okay. So, sorry for this. So, as I was saying, platform cooperativism. So, huge media coverage, huge success in terms of audience. Lots of researchers that were digging into this new type of model, and basically, for me it was also interesting to reflect on why it was so successful, this type of model, and I think the basic idea is like that this quote quite synthesized very well why it was so successful. If to imagine, like, to fight something, we need to imagine something that can be a new model, and in this case was quite easy. So like, let's make platforms but that are owned by the user themselves. So all the efficiency that we gain from this platform revolution allow us to be globally interconnected, to find and aggregate the offers, and really to also use underutilized assets and so on. Can we use it, but with values that are based on solidarity and on cooperative principles. So it was successful for this reason. But the reality is like that after 5 years, many conferences, many experiments, if you go on Wikipedia and you see the top, let's say, platform cooperative that showed, the majority of them are still struggling or actually have been failed all at once. So the point is, why this happened. Probably there are many reasons analyzing the situation, and I'm the co-founder of Airbnb, so an alternative to Airbnb, and Airbnb has many problems and right now is struggling a lot, but all these initiatives probably have their own problem. Also, some platforms have different type of network effects, so there are some that will work even at a city level, others that need European or global network effect to work. So all platforms are different, but there are few issues that we can actually find almost all this movement. The platform movement have some problems. Like the majority of those that try to make new projects have an activist background, so they really believe in what they do, but they don't have this entrepreneurial mindset that somehow help. There is also another problem, like the old cooperative world. So the cooperative that are food cooperative or insurance cooperative or banking cooperative, like they don't have really a strong innovation culture. The point 3, I think, is one of those that we really need to tackle and that we actually can tackle, and this project is about that, is the fragmentation of action that we see inside the movement. Many are doing and doing again the same or very similar projects without the ability to collaborate among each other, so wasting resources, time, and energy. Another one is the lack of technical skills and platform skills, and also the fact that often at the conferences you see people that actually self-promote instead of also analyze the critical part, like the things that didn't work very well, so that would become common knowledge for everyone to not do the same mistakes. the idea of David against Korea, this, the little one that fight the big and really can beat them. Right now we are not even playing with the rocks. We are just, we really need new strategies. We really need to rethink what we are doing for making more effective our way of trying to fight these giants. I like this quote from Gramsci, even if it's really hard, this pessimism of the intellect, we need to have the optimism of the will. There are many reasons to believe that we can actually change the things and that we should at least try to do it. All models are wrong, but some are useful. Why platform cooperativism should not be discharged all at once? For many reasons. One is that the cooperative world, the existing cooperative world, is really strong and they have lots of assets that are really hard to disrupt because they are even material assets. So there could be some type of advantages that you cannot find just in the digital world. Just to give you an idea, 12% of humanity is part of a cooperative. There are around almost 300 million people that are employed inside cooperatives. And they also, we don't have to imagine just small cooperatives that have few employees, but there are cooperatives that actually have turnouts of millions, if not billions. To give you an idea, in Italy, 10% of the GDP is produced by cooperatives. So this is one reason of why we should actually try to insist on this model. The other one is the European situation. 75% of the platforms, mega platforms, are from US. Just Europe have just 3% of the platforms. So there is a growing awareness that the situation, especially after the pandemic, is intolerable and put really at risk the future, the economic future, and the resilience of the socio-economic system, European system. So there will be lots of initiatives to change this thing. Last thing is the COVID era just increased all the inequality that we saw rising, and that was the basic problem even before the pandemic. Therefore, what we have to do? We need to out-cooperate the competition. So find new ways of collaborating. This doesn't mean just having new tools, new technologies. That's not enough. Internet was a promise of decentralizations. It turned out not to be that. So we need also new ways of organizing, and this project is a little bit about that. This new way of organizing doesn't happen only at the level of a single firm, but is happening also at the level of the original playground. States and civilization, I intend this as the capacity to build narrative involving and strong evocative narrative that actually aggregates people around an idea. What we are doing, I'm based right now in Rome, but I'm normally based in Bologna, that is in Emilia-Romagna, a region where 1/3 of the GDP is produced by cooperative. There is a strong university system, there is a civil society that's really into certain political and certain political argument. The commons are really important, and so on and so forth. And also a public administration that is sensitive to certain topics. What we are trying to do is to build this co-pilot. This idea was just based to create a narrative that could drive this imaginary of a community-driven digital economy. And I was talking with a friend of mine, and he was, okay, let's this valley, come on, we cannot, we don't bear enough more valleys. So I said, okay, let's think about a mountain. And we took inspiration from a book, The Mountain Log. This idea is, these two ideas of a valley and a mountain are those that are driving our work, and what will drive in the coming few months what we will do. Basically, The Mountain Log is a startup studio for platform cooperative, and also the catalyzer for the Valley itself. That it should be a distributed ecosystem for aggregating this type of ideas, project, and talents. With whom we are doing this project, we are doing it with the Retedoc, that is the network of cooperatives that I am part of. almost 60 million of revenue every year, more than 4,000 members in different fields. Also with platform design toolkit, so Boundary is the other company that I'm working with, and with COP that is the mutual funding from Lega COP that is supporting and that is really willing to invest in this type of project. Where to start? I will go a little bit faster than I think I'm too slow right now. None of the invisible must be visible. Like, where should we start? Also learning from what we did wrong earlier. So, to outcompete the competition, we need to ask ourselves a few important questions. Like the first one is, where can we have a cooperative advantage? So where do trust, for example, existing assets can be leveraged to gain some advantages over competition? And the other one is like not only where it's easier to do that, but where it is really, really important that we try to own the basic component and platform of the tools and the tools that we use. So the focus for us is really to B2B, is to B2B. So the B2B focus is probably what will be the next place for competition in the platform economy. Recently in the MIT annual conference, this was seen as the major, actually more open market to compete. The B2C is almost fully dominated, and we need to fight for that, but it's probably policymakers that will help us to overcome or at least try to compete with these giants. In the B2B, actually, Europe is quite well positioned, and we still have strong traction that can help us to take some market share in this field. The other point is the education relatively to platform talents. So this is what we are doing and what we are working for. What we are building and what we want to build is we want to gain an advantage. So how we do things together and why people want to do things with us is due to the network, the competencies that we can bring, the processes that minimize the cost and the time to bring an idea to the market and actually to be to the product market fit that is the ultimate goal, to have a sustainable project. And also to have the coherence. Often you don't really see what happens inside the project, behind the project, and being sure that those values that we stand for are present and are very well somehow protected. It might be easier to do it somehow with an aggregator of initiative, let's say. Startup Studio is you can call it Startup Studio, Mentor Studio. There are different names for this. The basic idea is that you keep the know-how acquired in the creation of an enterprise and you use it for a second one. If you had experiences in creating an enterprise, you know how much you learn and how many mistakes you do in doing that. So this is really, really useful. There are a few advantages of this model, like you have in the normal startup studio, you have startups that have a quicker exit, quicker time to exit, need less human resources, use less money, and are much more efficient in almost all the measures that you take into consideration. This model has been grown a lot in the last few decades, and what are we doing right now is building on principles. The next 6 months we will formalize the whole agreement with the other partner, but what we want to do right now is not over strategize and build a few principles that are basically to have a modular organization, scalable, sustainable, and purpose-driven. The COVID clearly has been slowing down a little bit the process. What we are doing right now is we are applying for a few fundings before do the fundraising with the COP fund, the mutual fund that I presented you before. For example, right now we are applying to an Erasmus Plus under the whole Alliance for Innovation with few European partners. The basic idea is like that probably if we can build connection between other similar activities and we can establish this type of model inside few European countries, we can be we can build a valley that is distributed, that is basically a giant distributed startup studio. Since we don't need 10 different alternatives to Airbnb, we don't need 10 different alternatives to Uber or Amazon or whatever. We need just one that's really that works really well and is adaptable to the different needs of local community. So thank you very much. This is my email if someone who wants to reach me. I hope that you could hear me all the time. Thank you.
Okay. If you want to go there.
So use the connection with him again? Or?
Huh?
Use the connection with him again? Or I'm still talking with him?
No, because it's difficult to interact here,
Yeah.
so now it was finished.
Would you guys mind making a circle?
You like them, huh?
Just to get out of the whole like.
This is the whole fight. It's hot.
Okay.
What they said.
The moderator, now we can start from, time is running out, but we can do a fast thing. If you want to present your ecosystem, shortly your ecosystem, but maybe more the challenges we are approaching now. And I would like to focus on how to bring the blockchain innovation, a useful one, into the cooperative one. So please do. You can start.
Yeah, maybe picking up what Schneider said, that crypto economics and platform co-ops, they don't really have to compete with each other, but they could rather benefit from two paradigms. I really resonate with this on the one hand, but on the other hand, I also see that this is still really tricky to put into practice. How they benefit is definitely that I've been part of some DAOs, and I don't really see it's easy to get a legal framework for them, legislations and so on. I mean, besides that, I think in the US there are two jurisdictions where they legalize the DAOs already. I think it's in Delaware and somewhere else, Wyoming. This is still the exception. And especially in Germany, where we also, maybe in 2018, founded a blockchain co-op. We had to take the title blockchain and all the sophisticated tech stuff out of the registration and the business model of the co-op, because they would not have ever approved that. So that's still a problem. So that's why I think like the co-op could still be a nice legal framework for people in a DAO to also secure their livelihoods basically, and also talk about liabilities and stuff what those company frameworks usually take away from individuals, from freelancers and so on. So there, the DAO could benefit from such a security of a legal structure. And the other way around, I see that co-ops, at least in Germany, and I think that counts for Europe as well, they are really static and I don't know when they've been invented, but it sounds like they are hundreds of years old. So the terms on what they they are deployed. They are really old as well, which means every year you have a general assembly where the members come together, one member, one vote. You've heard already, but they really need to meet physically and then put their signatures there. And this is not possible in a digital world. And in this blockchain co-op we founded back then, we had some people from the US and then from England. So this was really a burden to fly them in for some governance procedures. So there I really can imagine that a DAO would be the operating protocol that is connected to the bylaws of a co-op, and also then making governance and the decision making easier. Yeah, maybe this is just as an entry on the first input.
Also, something to highlight from Nathan is also this idea of politics and economics, like both, like political economy, which is something that is not talked about, especially I think in the context of cooperatives, where you're dealing with protocols, right? Like it's like you have two different universes. You have the universe of the protocol that anybody can access. So in the project we're working in circles, it's like there is 100,000 people all over the world who join this, and there is really no jurisdiction other than having access to the internet, right? So that infrastructure for sure. Right, and then there is like the element of the legal cooperative when you operate, because you have to pay for the Krankenkasse, for healthcare, and the wages of people and so on, and so that is kind of like a question of like how do you bridge that, right? In terms of politics and also in terms of economics, because for example, in the way we organize circles is that we do assemblies every month where we invite people from the community in Berlin, but also for the international people. So I host an assembly online.
2 and 2, or 1 for 1.
I do one in English, one in Chinese, and one in Spanish. So it's we're a small team, but we try to include these people as well, to onboard them, talk about the project and how do you organize local economies and so on. And so then there is this question of like, okay, you're doing an assembly, right? And an assembly, it's people talk and then you can make decisions together. It's often actually based on consensus, and by consensus I mean of coming to a consensual agreement upon something, not protocol. I'm talking about like making decisions together. And so there is a question of how do you put that on the blockchain, if at all, these decisions, because the issue is that there is all these assumptions in DAOs where we equate voting to democracy, but actually historically that's a very aristocratic view of democracy. So going back to plutocracy being still bad, it's like if you have a bunch of plutocrats voting over things, you're not really democratizing the thing, the protocol and so on. So there is this question of like, whose authority counts, right? Because we have had assemblies where people come up with great ideas and great decisions and great thoughts. We produce knowledge together, right, in these processes, and then people are like, okay, like how do we try to filter that into the cooperative, right, which has like employees and freelancers and so on, and into the developments of the application. So how do you democratize that process somehow? I feel like we're in this struggle now, right, where we're kind of like, how do we bridge that well? Also, if we make cooperatives in other places, because DAOs, I mean, as an activist, like DAOs are quite like, it's not really good for governance. I mean, the tools that are there now, it's just kind of like, how do we put these funds to here? But it's really not usable, So, like, I would like that the people who use this actually benefit and feel empowered from it and not feel like there is just some bureaucracy imposed on them, right? So for me, that's also an issue. So how do we actually, put things like direct democracy onto the blockchain through a DAO? So it's a democratic, autonomous organization, not just a decentralized one.
Yeah, I was thinking to another Schneider intervention, in which basically he said that we shouldn't be so attached to the formal form of the issue of the cooperatives, and the important things, and I agree, I don't remember what he said and what I'm saying, okay, but I think that the main goal, the concrete goal should be community empowerment. And then there are so many different contexts that it is okay to have maybe in one context you have PME, I mean normal company instead of cooperative, but you see that they are substantially democratic, so it's okay. Another one you have COPs,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the one you have, I don't know, even in terms of what is democratically owned and what you are actually voting. I don't think that people wants to vote on every issue they are giving €1 to, or on every single service and so on. And so I think we should try to embrace this diversity and complexity, and to be really good at connecting this and to working together, and not be purist about forms. And also, see, given that bigger cooperatives are quite static, I also think that we should, it is, the reality is like this, so we should understand how to foster these ecosystems in which there are different velocities. And so I think the most important part for driving change is to have like a small specialized agents, for example, young driven cooperatives, which maybe bring digitalization of new governance tools, or small organizations specialized in obtaining funding for all the ecosystems. And then you match this with all the big organization, medium organization, and
social movements.
Maybe in that context, we also need to recognize on the timeline where we are now. So we are coming from an economy, from a way of doing business, which is very centralized. And eventually, I don't know like how far we can look, but we are certainly at some point talking about communities where network effects will lead towards the creation of products and services and so on. And there won't be so many actors, middlemen in between. So maybe this is already like the vision of a distributed economy. But we are not there yet. And I don't know if like maybe comments are coming even later or so. But we are still like just having left this centralized world, I guess. And we are just small. Step by step adopting to those governance procedures, which are really hard to accomplish. I mean, on the one thing, it's not just that DAOs are not user-friendly yet, and that I don't know, like with all the co-ops and members I work together with, I mean, I don't have to talk about blockchains and present them a wallet because it's too complicated. And even like a smaller step, like what you just said, like that sometimes the different stakeholder groups within co-ops, let's say the people working there and the members, they don't really feel to be the same. I resonate with this because I also work at the Smart Freelancer Co-op, which gives freelancers access to social security systems and a better distribution of their money basically, and other benefits. And there we are just in the process of digitalizing the administrative process and creating a marketplace. And I happen to be in a community call where the community really, made it very visible that we are distinguishing between the community and us as the people working there by how we talk about the system, who's using it, by engaging them too little. And now I'm blaming me for this, and I am kind of like, aware of like how it could be better, but it's still hard to accomplish, and really engage the people, and then we're talking about 700 members of the Smart Cooperative in Berlin only. We're not talking about 100,000 smart members in Europe yet. It's still small scale, and even there it's not working. So there's really like a cultural process that we need to adopt to make those steps until we are where we want to be.
Also maybe cooperatives scale in a different way than normally intended. So like this, scaling through, scaling horizontally, scaling throughout, and I think that the number issues that you can't build a too big community is a thing, and the solution is to connect a lot of functioning communities. So how do you make this in circle that is now so big?
I think it's like you have to go to exactly like already existing communities. Like of course, like the actions you do also build community, but it's better to embed yourself in already existing relationships. Where already there are people who, like when I go to talk to people about circles, the last thing I mention is blockchain. Because like the guy who sells vegetables on the side, they don't care. They just you need to just like ask them what they need, their needs are, what resources they have maybe, and then you can figure out how to create these reciprocal relationships. I think it's a lot about that. I think it's a lot about communication as well. I think many times there is like a weird tyranny of structurelessness in the crypto world when it comes to communication channels. I'm sure you're all in like 1,000 Telegram chats and whatnot. And I feel like keeping up with like the ones that are for building community and making sure people feel part of it is important, because like as you were saying, like one thing is to have a cooperative where there are members and there are people employed and so on, and then the other one is like you somehow have an account through a protocol. So how do you create a sense of ownership there as well, right? Right, because there is only one circle scope for now, right? So like how do you slowly, like based on the organicness of like there's somebody in Croatia who's doing it, okay, do they want to do a cooperative there? How do you federate based on that actual experience of people taking it up? Like we just heard from some people in Montreal, I think it was they made a website for it and stuff in French. And it's like that, like you see where there is interest organically, and then you can figure out how to support them into building something there, right? I think like that was my very interesting role in this, in terms of channeling funds from all this wealth that has been accumulated from all these chains and parachains and so on, into ways of actually like funding a transition. I think that's the power of what we have among us here, is like how do we interface these systems whereby we can create the conditions by which we can abolish wage labor, for example.
Yeah, it would be interesting to go concretely about how you are doing it, specifically circularly in Berlin, but we don't have time maybe.
I mean, very concretely it's an assembly, as I said, so we do on the first Wednesday of every month. And I'm quite like militant on the same date all the time, because then people remember that on the Wednesday, there is an assembly, and then they book their time and then they come. And then what we're doing now is like a market assembly kind of. So we have products from the partners, so food or upcycled products, whatever. And then people can go there and actually experience the process of paying with this crazy application. And they're like, "What, you trust me? Do you trust me?" And it's very awkward. And so that's also a process of us gathering like ways of improving the application, right? And then we do an assembly where we, for example, in the next one, which is happening this Wednesday, we won't be there. The rest of the team is holding it. It's basically like Andreas and another friend who does the design and the product. They did categories for the marketplace that we're building. And so we're going to channel that to the community and ask like, what categories would you like to see in this virtual marketplace? So that's kind of like a way of, given that we're building product, how do we democratize certain decisions to say, okay, how can we hear from the collective and then bring that into our working process?
Yeah, add something here, because I'm now listening to you, so okay, how can we bring this to on-chain? And of course then me listening with this lens of the tokens here, I wouldn't, so you say, okay, should we create plutocracies and tie voting rights to tokens? And I fully agree, this is a major problem, and I think this is not overseen in our sphere. However, I just want to highlight some applications for tokens that indeed reflect communities and a community structure. So for example, you can have, when it comes, so just imagine you have a little bit further down the road, you have various work streams working in particular areas. And typically at Team Commons, for example, it's communications versus designing the parameters of our own economy versus building the application. So very typical, you have different teams, you have different work streams. Now, you can use tokens as a signal here, for example, today it's like we are requesting funds for this work stream, and then you work with tokens. But of course, how many funds or how many votes this particular work stream gets is also signaled from the community on how relevant they feel this work stream is, or how trustworthy the people behind these work streams are, right? So it's a piece of information you get from a voting process and from tokens you send to a certain person, number one. Then additionally we see more and more delegation in voting processes. We all, I think, share the problem of information overload. So how to keep track, particularly if we have a decentralized environment where you have a lot of different parties, individuals, community working on something different that all adds value to a certain ecosystem. Then how to keep track of it, and also how to shape decision-making processes that are appropriate. Sometimes there are decisions where you don't need anybody voting on that. It's just a matter of a work stream to distribute efforts or to assign timelines, whatever. But then there are other cases, and I would claim this is particularly relevant where we have interconnectedness, for example, between work streams, or affecting the majority of your participants. And of course, overall voting is important. And in today's DAOs, you have the role of stewards, taking care, I'd say, for their own sub-community of delegates, or of people delegating voting rights to them. So they have a certain responsibility to communicate towards the people sent voting rights. And on the other hand, you have again a signal of trust, and then you can also differentiate, okay, if this steward is representing X number of votes or X number of people, and that higher numbers, lower numbers, this is also another information on, let's say, the relevance of a certain steward's proposal, objections, and so on. So my message is, it's not only about the monetary value of tokens. You can use tokens for all kinds of signaling that are relevant for your decision-making process.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to maybe sit down in Berlin and also come up with a token economy brainstorming session. Because I mean, so far when we talk about crypto, we talk about circles as this medium of exchange and liquidity, but we don't have a governance token yet. And what we do within the co-op and within our governance protocol, this is just like starting the ecosystem and running the activities needed to run to keep the co-op alive, but we have not reached the point yet where we actually talk about how did you call it, business flows, for example. Like in our ecosystem, we have like food and logistics and marketing and other services and so on, because as also Damiano pointed out, B2B platform, they're the next driver for economic advantages. So that's why we also with the marketplace really emphasize on B2B and B2C, because it's also very relevant for our token value. This can only rise if we create the ability for the business partners to receive the token through selling, but also they need to be able to purchase other things in order to produce this stuff. So when we are at this level, that we really have, 10, 20 businesses from the different fields, then we should also figure out how to enable them to participate, because they are the actual, they should become the members in the co-op and also, reflect this within our structures, but it could probably be done in a DAO, or perhaps in many DAOs for like marketing or logistics and whatsoever.
If I can add on this, the paper just came out called the Shared Services Platform, the Rise of Nova, which talk about these cooperatives that are doing a shared services platform. And there are two case studies. It's Evacop in Canada, and which has some problems, but okay. And another, I don't remember, solar clean energy cooperatives network, and they are doing software, and this software it is shared and co-owned in a democratic way. I think it's just common sense, and will be common sense in 20 years. It doesn't make sense to make your own software. But the interesting thing is that we could start doing this by tokenizing property of the software. I mean, both the economic contribution that you give as a cooperative to the software, and also the governance. For example, there's was one of the participants here from Liechtenstein who said that now in Liechtenstein you can tokenize properties and assets. And yeah, I see it's very efficient to like share software for 100 cops, and to every cops chips in like X per month.
There is a problem there, which is the ownership of open source projects. I'm not sure you can tokenize the.
Yeah, but
unless
it
you
can stay
license-
open source, but you pay for the assistance, for the customization, for the deployment of that, for the basic
But not
maintenance.
for
Yeah.
or licensing.
No, you can. If you read the paper, it's complicated because at the beginning of this, one of these two networks, one COPS contributed way more than the others, and then opened the process. And so yeah, there you have to negotiate with the others how many value and credit you should have as a cooperative in the network. But yeah, this I think is one of the most promising fields of development in cooperatives.
And it also leads to an idea I had, which is actually, about a cooperative franchise and the remuneration system, which probably needs to be based on tokenization on the assets, that be the code of a platform or process learnings or I don't know, the brand or whatever others have been establishing and then would give away. It ties a little bit into the idea of Coop Valley, where I understand that they start new businesses, that they want to incubate and so on. But like my idea would be already to head jump this process of creating new business models and rather copy pasting the existing business models that are there and proven. And it's coming actually from the practice, because there are a couple of co-ops in the US, Up and Go, the cleaning platform, for example, who approached us because they approached us to multiply their business towards Europe. And actually multiplying, that's the term what we use rather than scaling, what you used earlier, because it's not about growing economies of scale, but rather like cutting it off and keep staying local, and then giving those assets to other people who wanna do the same, and you support them. And there again, like this tokenization or the cooperative franchise and a certain path for remuneration would also play an essential role, because then the software that has been maybe created from this cleaning platform could then be used by hundreds of other co-ops around the world, and entrepreneurs who are incubated by Coop Valley, but also they would feed a little bit of money back, as we are used to this in the blockchain ecosystem anyway, by paying a little bit of transaction fees and so on.
And the more cops they join in, the less it costs for every cops. Yeah. Of course.
I'm bursting with things to talk about. I don't know where to start.
I was going to close it, but what happened?
No, stop.
No. We decided to remove one of the activity from the network mapping. We can do it during dinner. And so we'll have a break in 10-15 minutes, and then starting the activist panel. And you have to talk about it.
Okay.
So don't get too tired now.
Well, so I mean, actually, I did I hate talking about like stuff that I do, but I did a podcast episode like dedicated to this topic. Where to start? I mean, the one thing that I am noticing about this particular intersection of space, I don't know if you guys have seen, but like there's a weird amount of VCs and like Silicon Valley types who are very interested in cooperatives now because of DAOs. Like they came to DAOs first.
Yeah.
They were really into technology, and they're like, oh, cooperatives, like, oh, it's just like a DAO. Their discovery was, it's kind of think about it in like a reverse type of way.
And their motivation to be interested in DAOs is not because they like the decentralization, but because they like the token dodge and don't want to
Basically. So I talked to a guy, the guy running the drivers cooperative in New York City, and he's saying when he's a guy who used to be enmeshed in the Silicon Valley world, and then he sort of left. But when he mentioned to some of his Silicon Valley friends that he was starting this cooperative, they're like, "Oh, are you gonna turn it into a DAO?" That was like, that's like their first answer. Is like, when are you gonna have a token to come out with your cooperative, which is not a DAO and has nothing to do with blockchain yet, but like, you know, there is this push to, of course, tokenize everything because of probably the legal benefits or whatever. So, I mean, funny enough, I'm advising a little bit on what they could do, but I'm not advising, I'm not telling them to make a governance token, because I think it doesn't really make sense for their particular context. But I think I think there's like a very delicate game that you have to play, like either, well, I don't know, like either like be okay with Silicon Valley making cooperatives sort of more mainstream, but at the same time accept, I guess, that it's going to deteriorate probably a little bit what cooperatives mean, at least whenever they do it. So I don't know if that's something that you guys have noticed or as well, or have encountered much. It's probably more of an American phenomenon, but.
What do you know the stuff?
Yeah, that's something different. But in general, I would say the new type of co-op business and this ecosystem is still very much underfunded. So I would really like to have not VCs, to be honest, but like I would like to see more people coming in and giving money. And I noticed this is happening in the US. That's true, but I'm not sure if you could call them VCs because they, I mean, according to co-op rules, they don't get a share, some equity proportional to them. They could ask for it, but
these are not the typical stakeholders.
Yeah.
That's the thing. They don't know the rules of cooperatives.
Okay.
They're like, why can't I?
Maybe
why can't I have like uncapped returns, like investing in you know? But like really, I had I'm not gonna say who, but I had a call with a VC a while ago, and yeah, she was just like, you know, like of course we wouldn't accept the capped returns. Even though we had this whole conversation about how much she loves cooperatives, and
they would or wouldn't?
Huh?
They would accept it or not?
They would not.
Okay.
You
They
know,
want the uncapped returns.
Yeah, they want uncapped returns, and they don't want a debt structure because they get taxed higher for debt. At least in the US, it's like 30% versus 15% for capital gains.
Yeah.
So the legal system itself is, at least in the US in this context, is
Skewed.
Yeah, it's skewed towards corporations, even at that level. Like they even make it a disadvantage to start a cooperative in that way.
Can I jump in for a second? Just because the crypto project I'm working on is to create the financing vehicle for the transition from, capitalists to cooperative businesses. So to allow people to sell to the organization, we keep it in escrow and then allow the employees to buy it over time. Yeah, because there's no financing in the US at all for this.
No. And in addition, it's also really hard for co-ops to get credits, for example, from the banks because the liability structure behind is more difficult than in limited companies and so on.
Yeah.
So I really also see this as an important field to work on and to come up maybe with some crypto financial products that are feeding money into a fund that could be used for collateralizing those credits for the co-ops, for example, or even like venture funds coming out of this, and also like back to your point, I think what I've seen in Europe at least is that VCs, they are accepting the cap on their dividend. Maybe many of you know ShareTribe, which like the marketplace software as a service company, which is not a co-op, but I think it's a co-op, and they're very
steward ownership.
Yeah, exactly. They are a what's it called? Like a purpose company, right?
Yeah.
Where one association in Switzerland has 1% of veto, so they cannot change the business model or the structure of their company and so on. And they came up with a quite elaborate incentive model for investors, where there are caps, but still like very good dividends, like from my perspective, so that there's some incentive to come in.
What's the name of that?
ShareTribe is the company.
The Purpose Foundation is the one
Yeah.
in Switzerland. I think like I think we're kind of approaching this moment whereby, you know, with the tools that crypto has enabled, we can also like rethink even like things like shares, for example.
Fermint, do you know Fermint?
No,
It's a company that allows you to issue your own actions
okay,
through their platform,
interesting.
and you decide how much, how many, the timing, the rules. Yeah.
Cool.
Okay.
Yeah,
You know what to
it's
do.
very nice. No, it's very nice.
What
No,
was
just
that
because-
you just mentioned?
Fair,
Just
mint.
Oh,
fair mint,
yes.
like fair mint. Okay, cool. No, I was just wanted to mention this one called. It was just an idea that we were floating around with Brett Scott in Berlin. Was this idea of like a perishable share, so share that rots over time,
How?
and like so you just like make a contract where it says how long it will last.
No, okay.
So then you can raise funds, for example, to like create a construction company or something.
Okay.
To buy housing or provide enough capital, then that you can give, and then if it has a cap on its wealth, or you can assure this issue, because corporate forms, the ones that we have today, do not die. They're infinite, essentially. So they're zombies in some way. And so how do we hack these forms that we use, and like shares, for example, to make them more adept to
Adam wants
reality.
to jump in.
I really like what you're saying in terms of the experiments of time-based rotting or something else. But I think there's room to question other parameters as well. I've recently been talking to anyone who will listen about time as being an important human requirement, and space as well, in terms of locality. There's been a lot of discussions about so-called real communities and virtual communities, but there's an embedding and set of values associated to space itself. I think that's a long conversation for everyone too, outside of the circle, but there is, and these questions and these issues should be addressed and at least linked into consideration of all the elements that we're talking at this conference. I think. So space and time.
Anyway, we are having a full 2 hours, I think, on Thursday on funding, to speak about funding in a concrete and strategic way, and to hack it. Because I think that we should hack the fake perspective that the market has on some issues. For example, if the market is liking in a period cooperatives because they are for the wrong reasons, let's take that money and then we suck it.
I wanted to add something on how you open talking about the difficulties of DAOs to have legal representation. So one line of research here, based on the experiment that happened with the DAO and the company that was incorporated in Switzerland to represent the DAO. So in Switzerland you can have, you can make the mission statement of a company to do whatever they receive by letter or by whatever public communication. So the idea is that you have a DAO that is making claims, and that's public communication, and that is bound to the constitution of the company. And then the directors of the company need to abide by the what the DAO is claiming. So in a way, it's kind of like having an international, a multinational branch that their motherland jurisdiction is the Ethereum network, and then the directors of the company are just
soft puppets.
Yeah, and this is possible also with associations. And this I was researching it myself and having discussions with Lex Tech Institute of University of Neuchâtel. And the problem with this is how to prevent a takeover, because the idea was to have an association without members. So only president and secretariat, I think that's the minimum. But then they are the General Assembly, and the General Assembly can change the statutes of the Constitution. So
that's great board meeting. That could be
yeah.
that could be an art piece of an empty room with chairs in.
Yeah, but the problem with that is that those people can take over the association and say, well, we are no longer abiding by what this address is telling us, but whatever.
Yeah.
So we didn't finish this research, but apparently by having a foundation, because the thing is that the members of the DAO would say, well, if the directors are just not abiding by what the DAO says, they could initiate a legal process, but then you don't have standing because you go there and say, the members of this association are not abiding by the rules of the statutes, but then you have nothing to say there. But having a foundation that cannot change in mission can be a foundation that knows what a DAO is, that recognizes the members of a DAO, and that if anyone from the DAO is announcing that the directors of the association are not abiding, then that could initiate the legal process. So that's one thing. And the other idea was on how to make cooperative structures more flexible. There is this company that is doing work for the Cosmos ecosystem. It's called informal.systems, I think. And they wanted to do things with co-ops, and they came up to the same conclusion that they're not flexible enough. But then they said a private company can have whatever internal rules. So what they are doing is templates of a corporation that works partially as a co-op and also has a way to reward the workers to have also some shares that would vest. Okay. So it's they have interesting blog posts exploring this.
What was the name of it?
Informal.systems or informal.system.
It's from made by the guy who started Cosmos.
Can we going to a close?
Anybody wants else to say something?
Maybe we start a break and we continue speaking, but with a coffee in hand.
Sure, it's good.
Okay, so I think it was amazing.
Yeah, thank you. After
this, we are having an activist panel.
Pretend you're talking and saying.
I already put my Tony back
We are having an activist panel, crypto commons between digital activism and the new industry.
Is it a fishbowl or is it
Andreas.
regular?
What's the name?
No, it's like this.
Circle bowl.
Oh, that was really nice.
Can I ask you a cigarette? Sorry? Can I ask you a cigarette?
Que inicien su propia cooperativa.